In this video, we're going to be showing you how to do a back loop only crochet square. Back loop only crochet is my favorite technique for pixel art when using crochet. My favorite technique in general is double knitting, but if you don't know how to knit, this is the stitch that I would recommend. It makes a really crisp pattern. Here's a sample that I made earlier. This is a little gnome, and you can see how good he looks. In back loop only, it's just single crochets, but you only work into the back loop of each stitch instead of both loops. And I will show you how to do that. The one well, it's not really a downside. In back loop only, you tie the yarn on the right side of your work across and cut the yarn, and then you reattach it to the right side and work across and cut the yarn. You never flip the work over. You will always be working with the front side showing. And you're going to be carrying your unused yarn with you. So it's not like Tunisian where you have bobbins, which makes this way easier than Tunisian, but the downside is that you do end up with a lot of fringe. You do not need to weave all the ends in though. I am going to show you a technique for encasing the fringe in a little border. This will add about an inch or so to every side of the project. So it's not ideal for scarves, but if you're doing a blanket or just a square like this that you might use for like drying dishes or protecting your counter from hot pans, and the size doesn't really matter, then it's actually really great. For scarves, I would actually work the scarf the really long way. So imagine that these are the ends of the scarves, like 6 feet apart. So if you turn the pattern sideways, instead of working side to side like this, if you turn the pattern sideways and work the long way, then you'll only end up with the fringe on the ends of your scarf, and it can become a design element. This stitch will work for scarves because the back doesn't look too bad. The front still looks better, but for a crocheted color work, this actually looks really great. There's no long floats of yarn that are on the back that can get snagged. But if you're doing words, the back will obviously be mirror image. And so today I'm going to be showing you how to do this square, and then we're actually going to use it to back this square so we have a true double-sided project. But that won't be for a minute. So to start a back loop only crochet project, you're going to hate this so much, but you need to do a gauge swatch. You never want to crochet any pixel art without making sure that your stitches are square. And when you're doing this gauge swatch, you're going to want to carry an unused piece of yarn as you crochet. I'll tell you more about that in a second. But don't just jump into this square. Do a gauge swatch first while using the back loop only technique to make sure that your stitches are still square while carrying some yarn with you. Now, this square, the pattern itself is 50 stitches wide. However, on all of my patterns, I include this little column on each edge that has dots in it. That represents an extra selvage stitch. You need that in back loop only projects because that's the stitch that we're going to put the edging on, and you don't want to crochet into your nice border and make it skinnier. You want it to be really even. So you're going to, I've already made a chain here of 52 stitches. This is just a regular crochet foundation chain. It's nothing special. You're going to chain, this is not knitting. Chain on 50 stitches plus 1 stitch for each of the selvage. So this is 52 chains. I am now going to do just a regular yarn over and cut my yarn. I'm just going to snip the yarn. It doesn't have to be very long because this is going to be a fridge. You're going to pull it through and just tighten it a little bit. Okay. So this is your foundation chain. I made this tail way too long, so I'm going to trim it too. Okay. Now on crochet foundation chains, it's kind of hard to see with this camera, but there's a side that it looks like a braid. Can you see that? And then there's a side that when you flip it over, it has the little bumps in it. And we're going to be working with those little bumps. What you're going to do is grab your blue yarn, or whatever color you're using for the gray design squares, and you're going to tie a slip knot. You do not need a long tail. So here's a slip knot with just a little tail, and you're going to put that around your hook. Okay. You are then going to just lay your crochet on a table or on your lap and grab the color that you're not using in this first row. If you can see this first row, it's entirely one solid color. But if you crochet these first 3 rows without carrying an unused color in the middle, these first 3 rows will be shorter than the rest of your rows that you'll be carrying a color through. Because on all the rest of the rows, you need 2 colors. So to make your stitches perfectly even, you're going to just lay that next to it, and you're going to pick it up, and you're going to find your very first bump in your crochet. Again, we're working on the back side of that foundation chain. You're going to insert your hook in that bump and underneath this white strand of yarn, and you're going to pull up a loop underneath those 2 pieces of yarn. So now you have 2 loops on your hook, and you're just going to pull the yarn through and make your first single crochet chain. And you're just going to go all the way down doing exactly that. You're going to insert your hook underneath the bump on the foundation chain and underneath the white yarn. Pull it through, yarn over, and pull through both loops on your hook. I'll try to hold it up to the camera a little bit. Underneath the bump, which is a little bit tricky, underneath the white strand of yarn as well, yarn over, pull it under, yarn over, pull it through both loops. Okay, and you're going to do that all the way across, and by the end you should have 52 single crochet chains. Alright, so I have now gone all the way across all 52 stitches. If it's anything like mine, it's a little bit curly, and part of that reason is if you flip it over, you might be able to see some spots. Let me do this really quick. Some spots where the white yarn is maybe a little bit bunched up. So anytime in back loop crochet you're doing more than just a few of the same color stitches in a row, you're going to want to kind of check the back frequently to make sure that you're not accidentally looping the yarn. So what I want you to do right now is grab the end of your work and the white yarn and just give it a little bit of a tug to make sure that all of those stitches that all that white yarn isn't bunched up in there. So when you flip it over, you really shouldn't be able to see too much of the white yarn. You might be able to see it peeking through here and there, but it really shouldn't be that bad. Okay, now put your hook back in your loop, and at the end of every single row, this is what's going to happen. You're going to yarn over and pull a loop through. And you're going to put your hook down. And you're going to grab a pair of scissors and you're going to cut your yarn. Okay, doesn't have to be too long. I usually leave maybe a little bit over an inch there. And then you're going to pick up your hook and pull that yarn through. And you're going to give it a little tug. And that just sort of ties off that row so you can't accidentally come back and pull it all out. And then at the end of every single row, you're going to grab those 2 yarns that you just cut and tie like a double knot. Not a super tight double knot, but it should be snug up against the side of the project. And that finishes off that row. Now you can't accidentally pull on either of those strings. And then you're going to go up to the front of the row and do exactly the same thing with the 2 strings that you started with. So So you're just going to kind of tie a double knot for the same reason. You don't want to accidentally yank on these strings and pull them apart. Okay, that was your first row. It will stop curling as you get more rows on. Okay, the next 2 rows are exactly the same as far as color goes, but from now on we're going to be doing the actual rows with the actual selvage stitches and stuff. So you're going to find the end of your blue yarn again, or whatever color you're using. You're going to tie a slip knot. Again, you do not need long tails on these slip knots. And insert your hook. You can think of this slip knot loop as if you were doing your yarn over at the beginning of a row in regular crochet. But you're going to lay it out. You're going to grab your other string and put it on the end so that you have a little tail. Now in the selvage stitches, you're going to be going through both loops of yarn. Okay. So you're going to insert in the first stitch under the V of yarn, just as though you were doing regular crochet. So there's the 2 loops, and underneath this color that we're carrying, and this is the hardest stitch of every row just because you have so many ends and things that you're holding, but you're going to pull up a loop underneath and yarn over and pull it through, just a normal single crochet. Okay. Now for the rest of the row, other than your last stitch in the row, which is your selvage stitch, you're going to be just working into the back loop of every stitch. You're going to ignore this first strand and just work into the back loop and underneath the color that you're carrying and do a single crochet. Back loop, underneath the color you're carrying, single crochet. That is all that back loop crochet is. If you can single chain, you can do back loop crochet, no problem. You'll get used to just carrying this extra piece of yarn underneath. So we're just going to work across the row, and now that your foundation row is started, this row and all other rows should be much easier to work through. I actually think that back loop crochet is a little bit faster than regular crochet just because you are inserting your hook into a single strand of yarn. So when you work your gauge swatch, make sure that you're doing this technique exactly. Make sure that you're crocheting over an unused piece of yarn because it does change the shape of your stitches a little bit. Alright, so we are now at the very last stitch in the row. Again, this is the selvage stitch that's marked by the dot on the end of the chart. So all that's different about a selvage stitch is that you're going to go over both loops, go under both loops, and again under the color that you're carrying, and just do a regular single crochet. And because it's the end of the row, I'm now going to do a yarn over and put my work down, and then snip this, and then pull the hook up to pull that yarn through. Just give it a little tug, and then we're going to tie our knots. But before we tie our knots, make sure that you glance at the back again. This only works on these first few rows because you didn't use the white yarn at all. As soon as you start using the white yarn to do actual stitches, you won't be able to check this at the end of the row. But for now, make sure that your white yarn's all nice and tidy on the back, and then tie your double knot on that side, and slide on down and do it on this side. Okay, I'm going to go off camera and do the third colored row, and then we'll come back and show how to do the color work itself. Alright, I've sped a little bit ahead to row 11 because I wanted to show you some color change techniques and tips on a row that had more than just one color change. So, if you're following along, we're on row 11, although it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to show you how I change colors. So, start exactly the same. Get your yarn lined up at the front. You'll get better at this as you practice. Okay, selvage stitch, go under both. Do a single crochet. Okay, and then on row 11, let's see, where is my ruler? It's right above this red line here. Okay, so we have 3 of the blue stitches. Now, we're about to change from the blue to the white on this border here. So you're going, every time you do a color change, you're going to insert your yarn and make a yarn over, or sorry, not a yarn over. You're going to insert the yarn and pull up a loop so that you have 2 loops on your hook. You are then going to drop the yarn and pick up the other color to complete that stitch. Now the reason we do this is because the stitch that's left on your hook becomes the top of the next stitch. And in color work, you want that top of the stitch to match the rest of the stitch. So now when I go and I insert my hook and complete this stitch, you see how it's all one color? So you're always going to start your color change in the stitch before the color change. So now we're just going to crochet with this color over our unused color, making sure that we don't get it all bunched up. Now, when you're dropping and picking up colors, you don't want to get your 2 colors of yarn hopelessly twisted up. So I always drop my design color in the front because I want my design to be in the front, right? I want it to stand out. That's how I remember what color I'm dropping in the front. And I always drop my background color in the back. So here we are at another color change. I'm going to insert my hook and drop a loop. This is my background color, so I drop it to the back. And I pick up my blue, my design color, and complete that stitch. Okay, I always kind of try to hold this yarn so that it's not too tight and not too loose. And before you do that, just give a glance at the back and make sure that you haven't accidentally bunched your yarn up. Okay, and here I am. We're now at the N in kitchen. So I'm going to do 1 blue. So I'm going to pull up a loop. I'm going to drop my blue, but in front of the white, and pull up the white from the back and complete the stitch. Okay, I'm going to do a white stitch, pull up a loop, drop the yarn in the back, pull up the blue, complete the stitch. Insert the hook, pull up the blue, drop the blue in the front, pull up the white from the back, complete the stitch. Okay, there are my 3 N stitches right there. Now we're going to do 3 white stitches. So there's 1 and 2 and 3. In these really short sections, you don't really have to worry about the yarn getting bunched up. So make sure that you don't pull it too tight and make the previous stitch really small. I always check on longer stretches. So now we're on this stitch right here. We're going to do a blue, a white, and a blue, and a white, and a blue. So, oops, we're going to finish the stitch here. Give this a little bit of a tug because it's a little bit tall. Here's the blue. Drop it in the front, pick up the white from behind. Complete the stitch. Give the blue a little bit of a tug to make sure it's not too tall. Do a white stitch, drop it in the back, pick up the blue, complete the stitch. Okay. Blue, drop it in the front, pick the white up from behind, complete the stitch, do a white stitch, drop it in the back, pick up the blue. You can see that my yarn is not getting twisted at all. You just want to keep adjusting the yarn when you're doing one stitch at a time to make sure that your tension stays consistent. So we've now done the blue, white, blue, white, blue, blue, white, blue, white, blue. So we're going to do 3 white stitches. This is it. As long as you're changing colors and still crocheting over the unused, and you don't get your yarn twisted up, back loop crochet is pretty straightforward. There's the blue, drop it, pick the white up. I'm going to do 1 white stitch, drop it in the back, pick the blue up from the front. 1 blue stitch, drop it, pick it up. We're going to do 2 white stitches. So we're going to complete that blue stitch, then do 1 white, and then 2 white, drop it in the back, pick up the blue from the front, do a blue stitch, drop the blue in the front, pick up the white from the back, complete the stitch, white stitch. We're going to do 2 white here, drop the white in the back, pick up the blue, there's the blue, pick up the white, drop it in the back, pick up the blue, complete the stitch, and here's the last blue. Drop it in the front and pick up the white. So we did about 15 color changes across that row, but you can see that my yarns are still completely untwisted and untangled. So as long as you're consistent with your dropping and picking up, the yarns won't get tangled. And then you just complete the row out as normal. There's no more color changes for the rest of this row other than those edge stitches, so let's get to those. I'm still crocheting over my unused color, and because this is a longer section, before I switch colors here on this last white stitch, I'm going to insert my hook, and then I'm going to just take a little glance and make sure that I didn't bunch the blue up on the back at all. You can see that's pretty clean. So I'm going to go ahead and finish out the row, being careful not to pull any of the stitches too tight or make them too loose, which is the hardest part about color changing this often. And then here's my last 3 blue stitches and my selvage stitch where I'm going to go through both loops. Okay, yarn over, put my project down, snip the yarn, pull the hook out, and tighten that little knot there. We're then going to finish the row out by tying this little double knot, sliding to the front, tie the double knot, and you're just going to do that on every single row. Some rows in this chart have hardly any color changes. Some rows have a bunch like the one that we just did. That's one of the most color change rows in this project. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of this square, and then I'll come back and show you how to do the edging to hide all of these ends. Alright, here's a different square that I've already finished doing the crocheting on. This little gnome holding something delicious, I'm sure. Like I've told you multiple times now, you are not going to need to weave in all of this fringe. That would be ridiculous. If you want to just leave the fringe as part of the overall look, if you like it, that is 100% okay. We've tied off all of the ends. You might want to tie them a little bit more securely if you're going to leave the fringe, but I'm now going to show you what to do if you want to hide the fringe. So the first thing you're going to want to do is lay it out flat on a table and smooth all of the fringe out on both sides. Make sure none of it's tucked underneath the actual fabric. And then we're going to want to give this fringe a trim so it's all the same length. I leave mine a little bit over an inch. Like I said, it does not have to be perfect. Get rid of those ends there. Okay. Ooh. Skippy. So we're going to keep using the same two colors. For visibility purposes, I am going to start. Ooh, knocking over the microphone there. I'm going to start the border in the white color. So I'm going to find my end. And the first thing we're going to do is make some slip stitches all the way around the border. So I'm going to move this back a little bit. All right, so we're going to start kind of in the top middle of our work. I'm leaving a tail so that we can weave in the end later. You're just going to insert the hook through just one of the V's at the top through both loops. We're now working through both loops for now. And we're going to pull that yarn through. And then we're just going to do slip stitches all the way across the top. So you're just going to pull up a loop and pull it through. This is not a single crochet, this is just slip stitches. Do not make these tight. You want these on the loose side. Because we're actually going to be working into the loop on the back, and if it's too tight, you're not going to be able to pull your hook through that very easily. So if you make these stitches loose to begin with, it will be easier later. So we're going to go ahead to the end of the row. This part is pretty straightforward. If I don't keep pulling my hook out. So we're going to go all the way to the end of the row, including this last stitch, but then there's this knotted stitch. Remember how we would make a loop and then pull the yarn through it at the very end of the row? We're not going to work into that little V. You're just going to work till the last full stitch. And then you're not going to do any slip stitches to go around the corner. We're just going to turn the work and start working into the next side of the work. I'm going to pull this out for a second so I can show you where we're going to do this. So the edge, if you look back on the chart, this colored border is 3 stitches wide. So if you look at the yarn needle here, there are these little tiny like dashes of yarn at the top of each stitch. And if you count over 3 on the border, there's like a hole at the base of every 3rd stitch. This is where those selvage stitch V's are inserted into. And we're going to do a slip stitch in every single one of these little holes. It shouldn't be hard to get your hook in there. What's hard is dealing with the fringe, because you don't want to get the fringe caught up in these slip stitches. So you're going to insert your hook into the base of that selvage V at the end of those 3 dashes. just pull up a stitch, and you're just going to keep doing these slip stitches around the border, but you're going to have to like flick the fringe out of the way. And again, don't do this too tight, but you're just going to keep pulling the yarn through the back without getting the fringe tangled in it. So if you look at the back now, we have these little bumps of yarn that we're going to be working into for part of our border. And then you have the V's on the front, and you have those 3 edge stitches visible. So you should have 3 rows of stitches here and 3 rows here so that the border is more or less even. Okay, we're going to keep going. Just the base of all of those V's all the way to the end. Alright, I'm getting down to the end of the row here. So here's the last row that has this hole at the end. And on this corner, again, I'm not going to do any like turning stitches or anything. I'm just going to find the last stitch on that corner and pick up a loop, pull it through, and now I'm working through my foundation chain V's, and these are tighter because I chained on a little bit snugly, and so now we're just going to work through all of these stitches. I'll work a couple more and then show you the corners. They are really sharp right angled corners. It's really obvious. Okay, you can see that it's pretty stark right angle of stitches there, and that's what we want. We're going to fix that in a minute, but for now you just go straight up to the end of the row, don't do any turning stitches, and then just work through this the bottom side of the square through all these little V's. Alright, nearing the end of this row now. It's more of a side, I guess. So the last real stitch of this row is right here. I'm going to do that. Okay, now this side looks slightly different than the last side. If I turn it so that the rows are the right way up, you can see that we also have the dashes. So if we start from the white, we have 1, 2, 3. These holes are just below that 3rd dash. There's not a clear V going up this side. If you crocheted into the V on this side, you'd actually kind of put a lot of pressure on the fringe in this huge hole here. So you're going to just find the 3 dashes, and right below that 3rd dash is kind of a natural hole. Again, you shouldn't have to struggle to put your hook through that. So yeah, here's dash 1, dash 2, dash 3, and then go straight under that dash and go into that hole right there. And you're going to do that all the way up the side. On the corner, just like in the last corner, then you're going to start again on this until we get back to our starting point where the white yarn is. We have now gotten back to the beginning of our little white border here. You can see that I have now worked all the way up to the very last stitch, but there's still kind of a blue gap here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the yarn. You're now done with white, and you're just going to pull your hook through. So you have this tail. I'm going to put that tail on a yarn needle. Okay. So to make this invisible join, I'm going to take the yarn needle and insert it from the bottom to the top of the next white stitch. Pull it through, and then I'm going to take that and put it back through the middle of the previous white stitch so that you perfectly complete it. You might have to tug on the end of your yarn from when you started to get this stitch evened up. Okay, so now the front looks really great, And we're going to turn it to the back. I've already woven my end in from the start, but you can see that we have this nice bumpy white border and then a little blue gap and a bumpy white border, so we need to finish that too. So I'm just going to put my needle underneath this white border here, and that completes. Now you have a little bump, a bump for every single stitch from the front. Okay, now as for this end, I haven't really found a great way to do this, but I actually go back underneath itself, that bump that I just made, so that it's at the bottom. Actually, now that I'm thinking about this, a better way to do this bump would just be to go in from the top. Let's just do that. There we go. We have a bump for every stitch. And now I'm going to go back this direction. And you can kind of see this white yarn peeking out between the stitches from your where we carried the unused color in this row. So I'm just going to insert the needle through like 5 or 6 of these stitches and pull it through. That's how I weave in my ends on this crochet, because the back doesn't look perfect anyway, and adding a little bit of the same color that was there before is not a big deal. So I'm just going to go through there and then cut that end off. So now we have a continuous section of white bumps all the way around the back side. Move that fringe there, you can see it on the side there. And if we flip to the front, we have a continuous white border all the way around the front. All right, we're going to switch to blue now. If I can find the end. And now we're going to swap this hook that we've been using, that we did our whole project in, for a hook just one size down. So this is just this was a 4.5 millimeter, and this is going to be a 4 millimeter hook. Okay. We're going to flip the work over. This is going to be the trickiest part of the border, just because it's hard to get your hook into these little bumps. But you're going to leave a tail for weaving in, and you're going to insert your hook underneath one of these white bumps that we just made. And this is why we're using a slightly smaller hook, because even though I didn't do this very tight, it's really easy to either not be able to get the hook in or to split the yarn. And so it's actually a little bit easier if you take your hook and point it down with the hook side down and hook the white from the bottom, and then sort of flip the hook back towards you so that it goes underneath. We're going to pull this yarn through. It doesn't really matter where you start. And for this starting stitch, I'm just going to chain 2, because we're going to be doing double crochets around this border. So we did that one. We're now going to insert our, you're going to do a wrap the yarn around your hook once, because we're doing double crochets now, and insert it underneath the next white stitch there, this next white bump, yarn over, pull it through 2, yarn over, pull it through 2. Okay, wrap the yarn around your hook once, insert it underneath the next white bump, very deliberately pull it through. So now you have the 3 on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, we're going to do that all the way around the entire project. I will come back on in just a second to show you what to do at the corners. That's what's going to be happening here. Like I said, this part is just the trickiest because it's hard to get your hook in. Doing double crochets, pretty straightforward. Yarn over, get it through the loop. It will be worth it, I promise. Alright, so now I've made it down the back side of one of the starting sides here. You can see that I have 3 white loops left at the top, and then this direction of the stitches abruptly changes, And so we're going to just work double crochets into these last 3 stitches, which are a little bit tighter than the other ones. So double crochet there, and then double crochet here. When you get to the end of the row, we're going to, this is for all 4 corners, where the direction abruptly changes, you are going to work your double crochet into that last white loop, and then you're going to just do 2 chain stitches. Turn your work a little bit, and then you're just going to work your double crochets into all of these stitches as well. Just fold down the fringe with your left hand so it doesn't get in the way, and that way you don't have to worry about catching it in your stitches. I actually think that apart from holding the fringe back, it's easier to get my hook into these stitches, but it depends on how you worked them in the front. So just keep going around your border until you have double crochets all the way around, doing the little 2 chains in the corner where the direction of the white stitch just changes. Alright, this is my last stitch of the round. Last one, over and over. Alright, so I've gone all the way around the whole piece. You can see that this border, if I stopped it now, would not be very thick. So I'm going to go around at least one more time doing double crochets. So I'm going to just slip into the second, so there was the first chain that we did, and I'm just going to slip into the second chain that we first started with. Just like that. Alright, now I'm going to chain 2 more and double crochet around, going through both loops all the way around a second time to make the border a little bit wider, because this still isn't wide enough to encase the fringe unless we backed it in really tightly. So this is the easy part of the border, because we are no longer working into those tiny bumps. Alright, so when you get to that gap at the end, your corner, you're still going to work into that last stitch, and now we're to the 2 chain stitches we made. You're going to do 2 double crochets into the corner, into this hole. You're going to do 2 chain stitches, and then 2 more double crochets into the corner hole. If you don't like how big the hole is, you can always just do 1 chain stitch instead of 2. But once you've done the 2 double crochets, 2 chains, and 2 more double crochets, then you're ready to continue and just double crochet into every stitch on this side. And that's what you're going to do on all the corners all the way around, and then we'll have this double wide border. Alright, I'm now going to do a slip stitch into that second chain from our previous row to finish off this round. Of course, this is not super tight. There we go. And I'm going to cut my yarn, pull it through, and we'll tie those ends in later. But now I've gone around the whole thing 2 times. This is the back. We are now going to flip this over and work the front. The front is a little bit easier than the back. If you would like to tie your ends off right now, that would be a good idea so that they're not dangling around while you're working. But I'm going to start working that second round. So if you find the end of your yarn again, On the front, you're going to do exactly the same thing as the back. You're going to make 2 rounds of double crochets, doing the 2 chain stitches on the corners and then crocheting into those chain stitches. So instead though, you're going to just work into the back loop only of this white braided border here. That will actually leave a little white stripe all the way around that I think looks pretty cute. So we're going to just insert the hook anywhere in this border. Actually, let's do it closer to the corner so I can show you what happens there. Once again, just push the hook up through the back loop. It's tighter right here. Pull this through. Leave a little border or tail there. You're going to chain 2, yarn over, insert the hook through the back loop, pull it up and do a double crochet. Wrap it around, insert it just through the back loop of the white, pull it through, double crochet. Okay. You're going to do that until this corner. Again, it's where the stitches change directions really abruptly. So we've got 2 more stitches to make. Possibly. One more. Then you're going to do your 2 chains because now we're at the corner. You're going to turn the work and you're going to do the exact same thing all the way down. So like I said, this is the same as the back. You're just doing it into the back loop of the white border. So you're going to go all the way around making the 2 chains in the corners all the way to the back, and then you're going to do the 2 chains up to start the next row, and then do the corners the same way that we just did on the second row of the back border. Alright, I have now finished both sides of the double border. We've got the back one and the front one. Right here it does look very interesting, but on the sides here you can see that the fringe is in between the 2 borders. And so now this is the best part of the whole project, is you're going to encase this fringe in this border. This fringe is actually still barely fitting into the border here. So it probably would have been better to do a third double crochet row, but it will do okay for what we need it to do for just this little beginner project. So I'm actually going to start down here. All we're going to do now is take this yarn and we're going to work into the front of the project is facing us. We're going to work into the back of this front border, just the back loop, and then the front loop of the back border. So basically, if you stick the 2 sides together, you're going to work through, you're going to make essentially a new braid. So you're going to use the back of the front and the front of the back. Okay? And you're just going to do slip stitches all the way around. We're going to start near the corner on this side So you're going to line up the hole, and we're going to start in the first, we're going to count over, let's count over 3. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, insert it into the back of this stitch. And if we look at this one, we're going to do 1, 2, 3. And that way we make sure that our corners are all nicely lined up. We're going to pull the yarn through. Then you're going to look at the next one, the back and the front, pull up a loop, pull it through. Back and the front, pull up a loop, pull it through. That's all you're going to do all the way around, including the corner stitches. So when you get to the corner, the last stitch. I just like to treat the slip stitches, or not the slip stitches, just the little yarn over the chains, and just knit, or do too many crafts. Just do exactly the same thing, back and the front, and then it closes off. So now we're to the fringe part. You're just going to kind of tuck this extra yarn into the little border, and because we're tucking so much into such a small space, it actually is a little bit puffy. Like I said, it would have been better if we had done 3 rows instead of 2, but for the purposes of this demo, 2 is fine. You're just going to continue to go around. And this is the way you don't have to weave in all the ends. So there's a couple of options that you can do when you're doing this border. You can see how nice that looks. Put this back over. First of all, if you don't like this white stripe around, I think it looks really cool. But if you really don't like it, you can work into both loops of this border instead of just one loop. The other option is that you can do this foundation original, foundation border in the same color as your edge. However, it makes it really, really hard to see, especially these loops on the back, if you do it in the same color as your border. So that might be something to consider. There is also no reason why you have to do double crochets on the edge. If you like the look of single crochets better because it matches the size and shape of your main body stitch, you could do several rows of single crochet, and as long as you do the same thing on both borders, it doesn't really matter. I'm pretty sure that in previous projects I've actually done half double crochet. You could also do treble crochet if you just want an extra long border stitch. Like I said, as long as you do the same thing on the front and the back, doesn't really matter. The other thing that you could do is, earlier we did this square here, the welcome to my kitchen square. If you look at the back, it doesn't really look like much of anything because the words are mirrored. If you want to, on a really small project like this, you could do a border on both squares and then just work the front border on both squares, and then you can join the squares back to back so that you have a double-sided project, so that it would be the welcome to my kitchen on one side and the gnome on the other side. I don't recommend that for bigger projects though, because there would be nothing to hold the two layers together. They'd be able to pull apart in the middle. And so you'd end up with like a big, massive closed off pocket. For a small project like this, it wouldn't really matter. And actually it would make it a little bit more even. Rather than having a single layer of fabric in the middle and a double layer on the edge, you'd have a double layer all the way through. And so if you were making like a placemat or like a drying mat or like a pad to protect your counter from hot pans, you could just put these two layers together and make a double-sided crochet project. So it's up to you. There's a lot of options. The border does make this unsuitable for narrow projects. I mean, as you can see, this border added quite a bit of width to our project, and if you were making a literally narrow scarf, that would be a significant border to add to a scarf. But on a blanket, this works fantastic. It makes a really, really nice clean edge that doesn't roll once you put the two layers together. And that is how you do a back loop only crochet project.